Hey, welcome to SpaceX Daily, Episode 7. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. Today is June 18th, 2026. Let's get into today's SpaceX developments. Raptor 3 engine shutdowns during boostback keep Starship reuse timelines uncertain even after the redesign. Several Raptor 3 engines stop operating less than 20 seconds into the boostback phase on the most recent test flight. The engine iteration was intended to resolve earlier reliability shortfalls on Starship vehicles. Early data from the flight shows the shutdowns occurred before the booster could complete its return profile. This continues the open question of whether production rate engines can sustain the repeated high-stress cycles required for rapid reuse. Observers will watch the next static fire campaign for evidence that the issue has been isolated and corrected. While the booster team works the engine margins, the upper stage side of the constellation keeps moving forward. SpaceX launched 3 Bluebird satellites on a Falcon 9 from a Florida site. The Bluebird spacecraft support expanded direct-to-cell coverage as part of Starlink constellation growth. The launch used a Falcon 9 booster on a flight that added to the vehicle's reuse count. This flight contributes to the tracked question of how quickly the constellation can scale subscriber capacity. Next data point will be confirmation of initial laser link connections between the new satellites and the existing plane. As Starlink hardware multiplies in orbit, SpaceX is quietly studying what else can ride the same network. SpaceX is assessing whether placing data center hardware in orbit can deliver lower latency and power costs than ground facilities. Early analysis focuses on radiation hardening, thermal rejection, and launch mass economics for server racks. The study ties directly to Starlink's existing laser link network for data movement between nodes. Cost per watt delivered to orbit remains the central unknown. Follow-on work will compare projected power budgets against terrestrial hyperscale benchmarks. That long-term infrastructure thinking sits alongside nearer-term competitive developments. Crews have started reconstruction of the New Glenn launch pad damaged in the test explosion 3 weeks ago. Blue Origin still targets a return to flight before the end of 2026. The incident removed a near-term heavy lift option from several manifests while repairs proceed. This development affects the competitive landscape for large national security and science payloads. Watch for the first hot fire test on the rebuilt pad to gauge schedule recovery. While pad work proceeds elsewhere, a separate on-orbit servicing effort just secured funding. Quantum Space won a Pentagon contract to develop a fuel transfer spacecraft for delivery to the U.S. Space Force by 2028. The vehicle is designed to extend the operational life of satellites already in orbit. This contract advances on-orbit servicing capability outside the Starship refueling architecture. It provides a benchmark for how quickly dedicated tanker hardware can reach operational status. The next milestone will be the critical design review for the propellant transfer system. SpaceX has continued to trade lower since the initial surge following the June 12 listing. The move reflects normal post-IPO price discovery rather than any new operational disclosure. Volume remains elevated as early shareholders adjust positions. The dual-class structure keeps voting control with Musk regardless of daily price swings. The next material update will arrive with the first quarterly filing as a public company. Coverage of the SEX debut emphasizes the company's simultaneous work on reusable boosters, satellite constellations, and crew vehicles. The prospectus highlighted that Starlink already generates the majority of revenue while launch operations remain in investment mode. Analysts note that sustained progress on Raptor production rates will determine whether launch margins improve. The listing itself does not alter day-to-day hardware development schedules. Watch for the first earnings release to quantify how quickly Starship flight cadence can scale. Musk acquired additional Tesla shares following a $116 billion options exercise. The timing has renewed discussion of possible structural links between Tesla and SpaceX. No formal merger proposal has been filed with regulators. The move occurs while SpaceX operates as a standalone public company under the SPCX ticker. Investors will monitor any subsequent cross-company filings for governance details. Observers on X noted that the Blue Origin pad rebuild timeline still leaves a gap in heavy lift availability through at least mid-2027. Several accounts highlighted the Quantum Space refueling contract as evidence that dedicated tanker spacecraft are advancing on parallel paths to Starship. Discussion around the Raptor 3 test focused on whether the shutdowns were commanded or uncommanded, with no official SpaceX statement yet. Engineers compared the SLC-6 tower removal to earlier Vandenberg pad modifications that enabled Falcon 9 operations. One thread examined the orbital compute study and questioned the radiation shielding mass penalty versus ground-based alternatives. Worth keeping an eye on is the fact that Raptor 3 engines experienced multiple early shutdowns during the boostback segment of the latest test, undercutting the expectation that the redesign would deliver the reliability needed for routine booster recovery. The failures occurred well before the vehicle reached the conditions required for tower catch or rapid turnaround. Resolution depends on root cause data from the flight recorder and the outcome of the next static fire series. Until those tests close the loop, the timeline for full and rapid reuse remains extended. On the AI front, SpaceX is evaluating the cost-effectiveness of placing computing hardware directly in orbit, focusing on power, thermal, and launch mass trade-offs that would determine whether orbital data centers can compete with terrestrial facilities. The analysis links to Starlink's laser-link network for inter-satellite data routing. Separately, the DOJ motion to dismiss the environmental suit against xAI's Memphis data center cites national security considerations tied to advanced compute capacity, though the filing does not reference any SpaceX hardware. From an engineering standpoint, the Raptor 3 shutdowns during boostback point to a classic rocket engine reliability problem of maintaining stable combustion and turbopump operation, while the vehicle is still under high dynamic pressure and changing acceleration. Each engine must deliver consistent chamber pressure and mixture ratio across a wide throttle range, so any deviation in propellant flow or cooling can trigger an automatic cutoff to protect the hardware. The redesign aimed to protect the margin on these parameters, yet the early terminations show the achieved margin remains insufficient for the full boostback profile. If the root cause traces to a sensor trip or a real hardware limit, the fix will likely involve either tighter manufacturing tolerances on the propellant valves or a revised control law that allows brief excursions without shutdown. Either path increases the idiot index of the engine, the ratio of finished cost to raw material cost, because added sensors, valves, or software validation all add expense without changing the underlying metal and propellant. Closing that gap is essential before the engine can support the hundreds of flights per booster that Starship economics require. The next concrete step is a dedicated engine test that reproduces the exact mixture ratio and pressure conditions seen at the moment of cutoff. Data from that test will determine whether the issue is solved at the component level or whether a broader architecture change, such as a different turbopump layout, is needed. Until that loop is closed, the open question of rapid reuse cadence stays unresolved. And a quick market note, SPCX is at $191.82, down 1.7%. Before we go, watch for the next static fire series to show whether the Raptor 3 margins have improved enough for a full boostback profile. And that's a wrap on today's SpaceX developments. SPCX is trading at $191.82, down 1.7%. Share this with a fellow spaceflight fan if you found it useful, and subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's episode. I'm Patrick in Vancouver. See you next time, and before you go, this show is part of the Neura Network, a family of daily podcasts covering tech, science, markets, and more. If you enjoyed today's episode, give Planetarian Daily a listen. Daily breakthroughs in science, health, and longevity. You can explore the whole lineup at neuranetwork.com. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.